Frida Berrigan. She has a little snippet of her long life, but she only wanted us to share a little snippet of herself. She's shy. All right, Frida Berrigan is a columnist for Waging Nonviolence and the author of It Runs in the Family, on being raised by radicals and growing into rebellious motherhood. She is a gardener and a community activist in New London, Connecticut, where she's running for mayor. Got my vote. As a mayor is a member of the Green Party. She attended Suzanne and Brayton's wedding in 1980 with her mother, Liz McAllister, who is here, fresh out of jail. Right? Where is she? If you feel called, if the Spirit is moving you to come and say a few words, to give us your expert tutelage on life, especially to the young folk here. Continuing with Frida, her brother Jerry, while her father Philip Berrigan was in jail, and mother gave the wedding homily. Whoa. Rebellious. Look out. Welcome, Frida Berrigan.
It is a lot colder right here than it was where I was sitting right behind Sister Claire and Brother Ito and Brother Toby. So if I start shivering, maybe somebody could bring me a blanket, something like that. No, I'm okay. I want the podium. Can folks hear me? Yeah? Is that good? Okay. If you feel like I'm yelling at you, you can make like a little tone it down, Frida. I'm going to move. I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and particularly happy to be here with my mom, who was unceremoniously and quite surprisingly released from prison after about 17 months of pre-trial detention less than a month ago.
20
months. Thank you, Brother Ito. Yes, 20 months from April of 2018. Right, so 20 months. I'm behind in my count just a little bit. So what a delight to drive up here today from Connecticut with her, and also to celebrate Phil Berrigan's, what would be Phil Berrigan's 96th birthday, which is today. So what a lovely thing to be with all of you as we think about his life and legacy and how alive it is in the work that each and every one of you are doing, and particularly in this holy ground of agape. So thank you to Brayton and to Suzanne for that. I was asked to talk about rootedness and to sort of offer some perspectives as not an old person and not a young person either. And so I'm sort of reconciling myself to middle-agedness. It's kind of nice, actually, to be halfway to 90 and still very connected to younger generations, both through my work and through my own children and my youthful spirit and all of that. So I thought I'd share some notes on rootedness for about 20 minutes, and then I guess we're going to kind of have some conversation, right? Okay. So somebody's going to help me keep time, right? Because I'm feeling so comfortable up here, I could just speak all day. So I wrote things down because otherwise I tend to kind of spiral off in different directions. So my daughter and I grow strawberries in our front yard. It's a weedy little patch, and finding the strawberries takes work, but it's worth it. The berries are red and sweet and wet from the morning dew, warm from the sun, and best eaten in that very moment. And we share it with the other kids who are waiting for the bus. And each year our garden in our front yard slowly expands. Tomatoes, beans, basil, collards, a few stalks of popping corn. We planted a grapevine a few years back. We have blueberry bushes. We live in an old whaling town on the Connecticut coastline where the Thames River meets the Long Island Sound. New London is halfway between New York and Boston, halfway between New Haven and Providence. It's a place where place matters, and where saying the name of your street discloses your class, discloses your position within the community. The old guard in our town holds on hard, but change is coming. The complexion, the cadence, the color of our town is changing. It's beautiful and dilapidated. It's struggling too amid the weeds. And I love our little garden. I love our tiny patch of earth. It's fecund, surprising, in constant need of care and attention. And I love our city too. In this small town, I feel visible, I feel accountable, and I feel known. And I'm finding rootedness. Growing up, we didn't grow much beside a handful of flowers. Our yard was small and utilitarian. It was mostly taken up by a wood pile full of downed phone poles. Those are soaked in creosote, so they smell really good when they're burning. Probably just like cancer, just every time you breathe it in, right? But we would bring in limbs scrounged from all of the parks around too. And my dad would bring the axe down on the rounds, and his suspenders would snap as the axe buried in the dense wood. And my brother and I would help transferring the chunks of wood to the pile in these two big gloves that got our fingernails dirty and smelled like car oil. And it's a scent I can still kind of conjure. The rats loved nesting in our wood pile, and every once in a while we'd have to take the whole thing down, send the rats to the neighbors' yards and put it all back together. We heated our 4-story narrow row house with this wood, so that smell of creosote was something we smelled all the time in the morning, in the wintertime. People came from all over, including some of you, to live at Jonah House, to learn about nonviolent resistance, Christian simplicity, and gospel witness with my parents and the rest of the community. If we needed flowers for our house church altar, my dad and I would go out into the neighborhood early in the morning, on a Sunday morning, and he would bring his pocket knife, and we would carve off blooms from the yards of our greener-thumbed, more well-heeled neighbors. And one man always seemed to be looking out his window, and he'd yell at us, and he'd curse us for picking his flowers. And my dad thought it was hilarious. Go on, go get those flowers. He'd laugh and yell back that the flowers weren't property. And he was right. But I look back now and I feel protective of that man and his hard-earned urban beauty. And my own sidewalk flowers suffer from the attentions of passersby. And while I wouldn't yell at a kid, I do notice when the buds that I've been watching open bit by bit, end up crumpled at the end of our block. My parents never voted. My father would say, if voting mattered, it would be illegal. And this glib laugh line, which, thanks for getting it, holds a deeper wisdom, right? About how it was illegal for many people to vote for such a long time, how the franchise is still under assault, where it matters the very most, right? As far as I know, my family didn't involve themselves in city politics. We didn't go to city council meetings, join the neighborhood association. Our community was illegal. It was off the grid, uncompliant in every sense of the word. We were rooted in a way of life, rather than a particular location. We were ascetic, spare, unsentimental. And all of that made it feel like we floated just maybe half an inch above the daily concerns of our neighbors. We lived in solidarity, and we shared a lot with those around us, but we were apart. Our home-owning neighbors hated that we gave food away on the corner every Tuesday morning, early in the morning, sharing what we had dumpster dove from the local produce terminal. They hated this line of poor people who waited for this garbage. Right? Our renting neighbors collected these anarchist gleanings and knocked on our door when they needed an extra $20 to carry them to the end of the month. We were renters too. We aligned ourselves with the transient, with the poor, with the black majority of our neighborhood instead of with the white homeowners and their well-tended, fenced-in, carefully guarded flowers. My parents didn't own anything. Not the tall, thin house at 1933 Park Avenue, not any of the cars we drove. There wasn't even a bank account with either of their names on it. Nothing belonged to my parents. They didn't want to be owners. Property is theft, after all. And beyond principle, it was easier to be war tax resistors if you were poor and didn't have anything worth seizing. How am I doing on time? Yeah? Okay. The neighborhood I grew up in was called Reservoir Hill, and which sounds idyllic, right? Sounds beautiful. And a while back, I met a young white woman at a conference who teaches at a Catholic school in Baltimore, and we played the neighborhood game. Ooh, Baltimore, where did you grow up? And when I said Reservoir Hill, she said, "Oh, it's rough over there now. Was it good when you lived there?" And I said, "Yeah, it was good. It was real, it was poor, it was black, it was underserved in the way we talk about neighborhoods now, but we had friends. We played ball in a trash-filled lot. We threw Osage oranges at each other. This can really they can make a welt. Big things. We swam in the park fountain right under the no swimming sign. Even after I cut my foot badly on broken glass that somebody had thrown into the fountain. It was rough. After I went to college, the city knocked down a whole part of our neighborhood, the White Lock section. Blocks and blocks of houses that had once been homes were obliterated, and the people were redeveloped out of their neighborhood. So it was good. It was awkward. In elementary school, my brother and I were the only white kids. We were pudgy, freckled, uncomfortable in our second-hand politics and outfits. We had these half-adult views adopted from the passionate, verbose adults who talked national and international politics all the time. All our t-shirts had political slogans. In 4th grade, I wore a red t-shirt, I can still see it, with a black drawing of Emma Goldman on the front and a message, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be a part of your revolution." And this was a particularly hilarious t-shirt for me to wear because I wouldn't have danced for all the tea in China, for all the money, for all the cool outfits. You couldn't have gotten me to dance. But it was still my favorite t-shirt. My family's provisional relationship to property and to local politics rubbed off on me. In high school, I knew more about what was going on in Bosnia-Herzegovina than in my own city. Even though Baltimore was as balkanized and as full of hidden fault lines as that region of the world, and as burdened by the sickness of white supremacy. When I was in college, my community left our home, that tall row house that we had rented, without sentiment or nostalgia. Most of our furniture, which was third-hand and mismatched, but full of memory, was also full of roach eggs and was left behind. My parents and the rest of the community did not look back. They became the caretakers of an Irish Catholic cemetery, lots of land for gardens and for fruit trees. And while I helped with this transition a little bit, I mostly missed it. And one day I came home from college for a visit, and their home was in a new place. And it wasn't my home anymore. My childhood home, so crowded with objectless memories, was now somebody else's home. And but somewhere inside that house is a repaired wall that once bore the outline of my brother's bulk. I slammed him against the wall, and the wall kind of caved in. And we hit it with a tapestry. We put a poster right over it. And that worked for about a year before somebody was like, what is going on? Right? Then we had to fix it. In college, I sojourned to El Salvador to understand U.S. foreign policy and imperialism and to be inspired. Right? At that time, the Civil War there had just ended, and a new generation of young people were emerging from armed struggle to form political parties. Right? Trading their identities as guerrillas for community organizers, mayors, local representatives. And it was such a challenge and so inspiring to see people my own age so hungry for a democracy that was so compromised and moribund and cynical back home. Right? It was kind of like, ugh, democracy. My brand of activists had eschewed, I can say that word out loud, right? Eschewed. The tools the Salvadorans had fought so hard to grasp and were struggling to understand and to utilize, right? This is what democracy looks like. And it was incredible to hear, the words I learned in high school or elementary school kind of said back to me with such passion, right? Here it looked like compromise. It looked like billion-dollar campaigns and slimy attack ads, disenfranchisement, and gerrymandering. And yet I was provoked into questioning why electoral politics seems so uncool in the United States and so life and death and so super cool in a country like El Salvador. This train of thought didn't last all that long, and I carried on with what I now kind of think of as a dysfunctia of knowing more about the world far away from my own self than knowing about my local context. Right? I lived as a young adult in Brooklyn as a serial renter. I hovered above the surface of my location. Right? Never really saw the point of getting to know my neighbors. Of course, I loved them in the biblical sense. Not that biblical. But I didn't want to pause for that, right? I performed my activism in Manhattan, in public, in spectacle. And I went home to expensive apartments in poor neighborhoods. I knew that the big issues that I was activated by at that time, the global war on terror, Islamophobia, mass incarceration, systemic inequality, that all of these issues had hyper-local analogs. And manifestations, but I wanted to make a difference, and to me at that time making a difference meant marching in Manhattan. And this was a posture I could and did sustain for quite a while, right? There was always some place to go, always some demonstration far away, always some encampment or mobilization that seemed like everybody was going to, right? And I wanted to go too. And so this pace of go, right? Dan Berrigan always said, you have to know where you stand and stand there. And it took me a while to hear that advice. But finally I listened, and that advice kind of propelled me out of Brooklyn into a short stint at Mary House Catholic Worker in New York City, and then a ready for rootedness, a kind of unchangeable, constant change. Right? I was enclosed in the four walls of my new freedom. Right? It's how Thomas Merton described arriving at the Abbey of Gethsemane in December of 1941. Right? The four walls of my new freedom. He was leaving the modern world to become a contemplative, to become a monk. And to our modern ears, freedom is defined as the exact opposite of four walls, right? Particularly the four walls of a Gothic monastery. Freedom is impulse. Freedom is frivolity. Freedom is life without consequence, life without responsibilities. Living at the corner of Cedar Grove and Connecticut Avenue, roused by the deep bass of passing cars and the grinding reverberation of crotch rockets. Wait till I'm mayor, and I'm just gonna damn those crotch rockets. I'm just gonna. Anyway, guess they vote too, right? The crotch rocket guys. But at this corner, I connect with Thomas Merton's freedom, right? Home is made up of so much more than four walls, and yet you need those four walls to hold a home up. Bounded by these four walls of my home, built in 1921, now plastered with our pictures and posters, I now bear this small-town obligation of politeness and the street nod. The duty to know one's neighbors and to account for the state of one's lawn. I don't do a very good job of that one, but I hear about it. Sherwood Forest is what my neighbor Dave calls it. But anyway, these four walls of freedom gave us a place to stand, right? They gave us a vantage point from which to look forward into an uncertain future and to see ourselves there and to see our children there and to be able to build a network of relationships in our neighborhood to take care of one another. Did I miss a page? I think I did. How you guys doing? Are you bored yet? No? Okay, good. Okay, no, I didn't miss anything. Right, our kids, Madeline, who's 5, Seamus, who's 7, Rosina, who's 12, will learn by our example. And somehow our future adults will, we hope, be compassionate and skilled members of a resilient community. And it's hard to see how sharing tomatoes out of our front yard as a lesson towards an urban agrarianism built in the shell of Trumpian capitalism's collapse, right? But that's kind of the lesson we're trying to teach. One tomato at a time. The one tomato revolution as the antidote to Trump's rapaciousness, right? From this place of standing, from this intersection, from these four walls, my family and I are also able to look back, right? Look way back. And learn the bloody, brutal, very profitable histories of our local community, right? A history of whale hunting and slave trading that built the lasting beauty of our small town. We tell the story of Adam Jackson, who was an enslaved man who lived about 5 blocks from our home, under the control of a man named Joseph Hempstead. Joseph kept a diary, and from that record, we can know bits and pieces of Adam's life. And the pieces of Adam's life that we know challenge the assertion that northern slavery was genteel or gentle. And those are important lessons for us to learn. From these four walls, we're free to go even further back, to the year 1637, and a few miles up our coastline. On May 26th of that year, Connecticut colonists attacked a Pequot village, surrounded by a high palisade, and there were only 2 exits to this village. Hundreds of men, women, and children were asleep inside the palisade, inside their small houses. And the attackers, the colonists, set fire to the village. They blocked the exits and shot anyone who made it over the wall. Between 400 and 700 people were killed on that day. And we were there. My little family was there. Our great, plus maybe 12 grandfather of my husband's grandfather, great grandfather, was there. Nicholas Olmsted, he's named in the record as one of the ones who set the fire. Crept into the village to set the fire that killed 400 to 700 people. Right? It's a heavy thing to hold, right? A scar that was, pretty effectively healed over, right? Until my husband's father's generation, and picking at that wound, revealing that culpability for my husband's family, for my children, right? That culpability. And we're still here, right? We were there, and we're still here in the form of being beneficiaries of white supremacy. It's the responsibility of rootedness to weave that horror and history into the warmth and weft of our lives, and to not shield even the smallest children from that responsibility. So this summer we had the great privilege to walk with Sister Claire and Brother Ito and Brother Toby and others, connecting and uncovering the sites of colonial massacre, including our own colonial massacre. And our children walked, meeting elders of different communities in both Connecticut and Massachusetts, hearing stories and learning that showing up is the first step to understanding connection and responsibility and building compassion and solidarity. Right? And those are lessons I'm so proud that my children are learning. This connection to the past also brings joy. Right? It doesn't just bring these sadness. Right? My mother-in-law gave my son a t-shirt for his 7th birthday. Her son, my husband, Patrick, had tie-dyed it in a play group when he was 6 or 7 years old and worn it to a faded shine. Seamus now wears this same t-shirt 30 years later. And I revel in object-based memorialism. And I feel the pangs of loss of my own childhood objects that held no narrative magic for my pragmatic, forward-looking parents. Where are they? Where are my t-shirts? I gotta go back to therapy. No, but they honed their own needs to a narrow point, my parents did. Honed their own needs to a narrow point, and taught us to be as pared down and unsentimental as they were. And I appreciate that lesson too. So we're teaching rootedness to our active, distractible children. It's in the way we talk about land, it's in the way we talk about community, it's in the way we help pick up trash along our streets, the way we encourage them to greet adults by name. They come with us to city council meetings and board of ed meetings. They know who the mayor is, and they can't wait to move into his house. They're super bummed to find out that in a town like New London, there is no mayor's mansion, unless the mayor happens to live in a mansion already, which we don't, and the current mayor does. They listen to us talk about local politics. They want to participate in it. My son's now talking about the Dems in an intense way, right? So here we are. We're planted. We're rooted in new soil. We're reaching down. We're growing up. We're branching out. And as was mentioned, and seeking political office, which is awkward, right? My dad would say. He had a lot of voting-related adages. My dad would also say, "Don't vote. It only encourages them." But in a small town like ours, where half registered voters don't vote because they don't see the point, and half of eligible voters aren't registered because they haven't been listened to or connected with, it seems like high time to shake that up. And so I'm running for mayor. And debates start next week. If anybody wants to come, that'll be fun. And running not to win, right, but to represent all who are left out of our political processes. Running to recapture that democratic experiment and excitement I felt so many years ago in El Salvador. Running to talk about racism and gentrification, the need for economic development that values and prioritizes the people who are here, no matter what happens with the next promised economic boom of nuclear submarines, right? So anyway, so that's a little about me, and I somehow got speaking of rootedness, some sort of little bug, and I look forward to some conversation. Yeah.